The silence between the stars had been broken by screaming. For 3 months now, the emergency channels across 17 star systems carried the same desperate message. Entire worlds begged for help against something that defied every law of nature and warfare. The creature appeared without warning, arrived without ships, and conquered without mercy. Military experts called it impossible. Survivors called it Grimfang. The beast stood 30 feet tall when it chose to walk upright, though witnesses reported it could shift and flow like living shadow when it hunted. Its crystalline scales caught starlight and threw it back in sharp cutting beams. Orange eyes burned in a skull that belonged to nightmares, and when it opened its mouth, rows of teeth gleamed like polished obsidian. But the most terrifying thing about Grimfang was not its size or its weapons. It was the way entire populations simply gave up when they saw it. The first world to fall had been Kepler-7, a mining colony with decent defenses and a population of 2 million. The orbital stations detected nothing on their sensors until Grimfang was already landing in their capital city. Security footage showed the creature walking through their streets while people fled screaming. Then the footage stopped. When rescue ships arrived 6 days later, they found the entire population sitting in the central square, staring at nothing with empty eyes. The miners were alive but broken. They spoke in whispers about the voice in their heads, about dreams filled with submission and fear. The creature had not killed them. It had done something worse. It had made them want to serve. Commander Foster of the Rescue Corps had seen the footage 100 times. Each viewing made his skin crawl. The people of Kepler-7 moved like sleepwalkers, tending to strange crystalline structures that Grimfang had somehow grown from the planet's rock. They harvested rare metals and loaded them onto ships that appeared from nowhere. When asked what they were doing, the miners simply said they were helping their master hunt. The pattern repeated across system after system. Grimfang would arrive, land in the most populated area, and somehow project its will into every mind within miles. Resistance was not just futile, it was impossible. The creature's psychic presence overwhelmed rational thought and replaced it with absolute obedience. The Centauri Defense Fleet had been the first military force to engage the beast directly. Admiral Chen led 47 ships and 12,000 of the galaxy's best soldiers into battle, above the industrial world of Factory Prime. The fight lasted exactly 18 minutes. Grimfang had simply looked at their fleet through the void of space, and half the crews stopped responding to orders. They turned their weapons on their own ships while their commanders screamed helplessly over the communications channels. The surviving vessels fled while Grimfang landed on Factory Prime and claimed another world for its growing empire. The Admiral's final report was brief and terrifying. The creature was not just physically impossible, it was strategically unstoppable. How do you fight an enemy that can turn your own people against you with a glance? The Silicon worlds tried next with their mechanical armies. Robots could not be broken by psychic assault, their creators reasoned. They were wrong. Grimfang's influence reached beyond organic minds. The creature somehow corrupted the artificial intelligences as well, turning entire robot legions into willing servants within hours. The silicon-based beings who ruled those worlds watched their greatest creation kneel before an alien monster and call it master. Even the Psi Collective, warriors who had trained their entire lives to resist mental attacks, failed miserably. Their psychic shields crumbled like paper before Grimfang's overwhelming presence. Master telepaths who could read thoughts across star systems found themselves unable to maintain their own identity in the face of the creature's will. They joined the growing army of servants, their advanced mental training making them even more effective slaves. Scientists and military leaders across the galaxy struggled to understand what they were facing. Some believed Grimfang was a biological weapon created by some long-dead civilization, a perfect predator designed to conquer and control. Others thought it might be something far older, a creature from the dark spaces between stars that fed on submission itself. A few radical theorists suggested it was not even from their dimension, but something that had slipped through cracks in reality. The truth was simpler and more terrifying than any of their theories. Grimfang was hunting. It moved from world to world not to conquer or destroy, but to find something it had lost long ago. The creature's psychic roars carried undertones of loneliness and desperate searching, but whatever it sought, it could not find it among the cowering populations it enslaved. The beast's frustration grew with each conquest. When the people of New Babylon 7 fell to their knees in worship, Grimfang's rage shook their cities. When the proud warriors of the Flame Nebula threw down their weapons in surrender, the creature's disappointment crushed their spirits. Nothing satisfied it. No amount of fear or submission filled the empty space in its ancient heart. Trade routes collapsed as merchant ships refused to travel through conquered space. Governments evacuated entire sectors rather than risk facing the unstoppable predator. Refugee camps swelled with populations fleeing from worlds that had not even been attacked yet. Panic spread faster than Grimfang itself, leaving entire civilizations paralyzed with terror. The galaxy's greatest minds worked desperately for solutions. They tried everything from quantum bombs to psychic dampeners to reality-distorting weapons. Nothing worked. Grimfang seemed to exist outside the normal rules of physics and biology. It could not be killed, could not be stopped, and could not be reasoned with. It simply took what it wanted and moved on, leaving broken worlds in its wake. Military databases filled with useless tactical analyses. The creature had no ships to target, no supply lines to cut, no allies to turn against it. It needed nothing from the civilizations it conquered except their submission. Even worse, it seemed to be learning from each encounter. The beast adapted to new weapons and strategies within hours, making each subsequent battle even more hopeless than the last. Now the emergency broadcasts carried a new message. Grimfang was moving toward the inner systems, toward the more heavily populated worlds. Its path was clear and inevitable. The creature was heading for the small blue world that had been sending out signals across the galaxy for less than a century. It was heading for Earth. Humanity would face the unstoppable predator that had brought 17 civilizations to their knees. And unlike the others, they would have nowhere left to run. The warning came through subspace channels at 0347 hours, Earth Standard Time. Long-range sensors had detected the impossible signature moving through the outer solar system like a dark comet. Grimfang had arrived, and it was not alone. Behind the creature stretched a fleet of captured vessels from 17 different civilizations. Ships that had once defended proud worlds now served as the beast's hunting pack. Their crews moved with the same empty dedication as all of Grimfang's servants, maintaining alien engines and weapons they no longer understood, driven only by the need to serve their master. General Martinez stood in the command center beneath Luna City, watching the tactical displays with grim determination. As head of the Terran Defense Corps, she had spent months preparing for this moment. Every available ship had been recalled to Earth's solar system. Every weapon had been charged and aimed toward the outer planets. Humanity would make its stand here, in the cradle of their species. The defense fleet stretched from Mars to Jupiter, nearly 300 vessels representing the best of human engineering. Battleships bristled with railguns and missile pods. Cruisers charged their particle beams and prepared torpedo salvos. Fighters swarmed like angry wasps around carrier ships, their pilots ready to die for their homeworld. President Williams had made the decision to fight rather than evacuate. Where could humanity run that Grimfang could not follow? The creature had conquered faster than light civilizations and broken psychic empires. Earth's primitive rockets could barely reach the nearest star. Running would only delay the inevitable and abandon billions of people to face the monster alone. The first contact came near Neptune's orbit. Captain Rodriguez led the advance squadron in her flagship Defiance, hoping to buy time for the main fleet to position itself. Her ships opened fire at maximum range, sending streams of superheated metal and focused energy toward the approaching threat. Their weapons found their target. Explosions bloomed against Grimfang's crystalline hide, but the creature kept coming. The beast absorbed their attacks like a mountain weathering a storm. When it finally responded, the counterattack was devastating. Orange light erupted from the creature's eyes, and 3 ships simply stopped functioning. Their crews sat motionless at their stations while their vessels drifted helplessly through space. Rodriguez ordered an immediate retreat, but it was already too late. The psychic wave hit her remaining ships like a tsunami of despair. Fighter pilots found their hands frozen on their controls. Gunners stared at their targeting screens without seeing them. The lucky ones simply fell unconscious. The unlucky ones began turning their weapons on their own allies. The captain managed to send one final transmission before her ship was overwhelmed. All stations fall back. Repeat, fall back. The creature is stronger than our reports indicated. It can reach our minds across impossible distances. Do not engage directly. Repeat, do not engage. The words reached Earth just as the main battle began near Mars. Admiral Hayes had deployed the bulk of humanity's fleet in layered defensive positions, hoping to slow Grimfang's advance through sheer weight of numbers. The strategy lasted exactly 7 minutes. The beast's psychic presence washed over the human ships like poisonous fog. Entire squadrons turned on each other in minutes. The communications channels filled with screaming as crews fought desperately against the alien will invading their thoughts. Some ships managed to maintain discipline long enough to fire a few salvos before succumbing. Others simply drifted into the path of their own missiles. From her command bunker on Luna, Martinez watched humanity's greatest military achievement tear itself apart. Ships that had taken years to build became scrap metal in seconds. Thousands of trained personnel became mindless servants with a single psychic pulse. The creature was not just defeating them, it was converting their strength into its own weapon. The few vessels that escaped the initial assault regrouped near Earth's moon. Their crews traumatized but still fighting. Hayes reorganized the survivors into a final defensive line, knowing it was hopeless but refusing to surrender. If they could delay Grimfang even a few hours, perhaps the civilian evacuations could save some lives. The beast seemed to sense their desperation. Instead of pressing its attack, Grimfang paused among the wreckage of the Mars fleet and began to broadcast. The transmission reached every radio, every television, every communication device on Earth simultaneously. The creature's voice spoke directly into human minds, carrying undertones of ancient hunger and endless loneliness. Small creatures of the blue world, the voice whispered across 7 billion minds. You fight bravely but uselessly. I have broken civilizations older than your sun. I have claimed species that could reshape reality with their thoughts. What hope do you think your primitive weapons might have against me? The psychic pressure behind the words made people collapse in the streets. Some fell to their knees and began praying to gods they had never believed in. Others simply sat down where they stood and waited for the end. A few, driven beyond endurance, began laughing hysterically at the cosmic joke of their situation. But the creature's broadcast carried something else, something the previous worlds had never experienced. Beneath the threats and displays of power, there was a question. Why do you resist when resistance brings only pain? Why do you fight when surrender offers peace? What do you hope to protect that is worth such suffering? World leaders huddled in their bunkers debating surrender terms that would never be honored. Military commanders calculated desperate strategies that had no chance of success. Scientists worked frantically on weapons that could not be built in time, but in the end, none of their efforts mattered. Grimfang began moving toward Earth, brushing aside the last defenders like insects. The few remaining ships that tried to intercept the creature simply joined its growing fleet of servants. Their crews smiled empty smiles as they turned their guns on their former allies and opened fire. The beast entered Earth's atmosphere above the Atlantic Ocean, its massive form wreathed in flames that could not burn its crystalline skin. It ignored the frantic missile strikes from surface installations, the desperate fighter attacks from surviving air bases, the final defiant gestures of a species facing extinction. The weapons could not harm it, and the people firing them would serve it soon enough. Grimfang landed in the ruins of New Geneva, crushing buildings beneath its feet as casually as a human might step on ants. The city's population had already fled or hidden, leaving empty streets for the creature to claim. It stood in the central square and released another psychic pulse, this one carrying a simple message to every mind on Earth. I am Grimfang, the hunger between stars, the will that cannot be denied. Lay down your weapons, open your minds, serve willingly, and your deaths will be quick. Resist further, and your suffering will last for generations. Choose now, small creatures. Choose wisely. The ultimatum echoed through emergency broadcasts as world leaders realized they had run out of options. Humanity's greatest military force had been shattered in hours. Their most advanced weapons were useless against the creature's impossible abilities. Surrender was not just the logical choice. It was the only choice. But in the suburbs outside New Geneva, an 8-year-old girl named Lucy Wang was hiding in her basement with her grandmother, completely unaware that the fate of her entire species was about to change forever. Lucy Wang pressed her face against the small basement window and watched the sky burn orange. The sounds from above had stopped an hour ago, but she could still feel the ground trembling beneath her feet. Her grandmother sat in the corner, clutching her medical inhaler with shaking hands. whispering prayers in Mandarin that Lucy only half understood. The evacuation sirens had wailed for 30 minutes before falling silent. Lucy remembered the frantic voices on the emergency broadcasts, the way the announcers spoke faster and faster until their words became meaningless noise. Then the power had gone out, leaving them in darkness with only her grandmother's ancient radio crackling with static and distant screams. "Nai nai. When will Mama and Papa come back?" Lucy asked, though she knew the answer. Her parents had died in the mining accident on Titan 2 years ago, when the ice harvester exploded and took 17 people with it. Sometimes she still forgot, especially when she was scared and wanted someone to hold her. Her grandmother, Chen Wei, looked at her with eyes made dim by cataracts and worry. "Soon, little flower," she whispered, the same lie she always told. "They will come back soon." The old woman's heart condition had prevented them from reaching the evacuation centers in time. When the sirens sounded, Chen Wei had managed only a few steps before collapsing on their front porch, gasping for breath. Lucy had helped her inside and down to the basement, where they kept emergency supplies and Lucy's collection of stuffed animals. Now they waited in the dark while something terrible hunted through their neighborhood. Lucy could hear it moving between the houses, its footsteps shaking windows and rattling doors. Whatever was out there was huge and getting closer, but Lucy was not afraid, not really. Fear was for things that could hurt you, and she had already lost everything that mattered. The creature reached their street just after sunset. Lucy heard the neighbor's house collapse with a sound like thunder, then silence. She climbed on a chair to look out the basement window and saw a shadow moving against the burning sky. The shadow had eyes like orange stars and a shape that hurt to look at directly. "Stay down," her grandmother whispered urgently, but Lucy could not look away. The creature was beautiful in a terrible way, like the pictures of extinct dinosaurs in her books, but alive and real and impossibly large. It moved through their yard with careful steps as if it was looking for something specific. The front door exploded inward with a crash that shook dust from the ceiling. Heavy footsteps thundered across the floor above them, followed by the sounds of furniture being pushed aside. Lucy's grandmother pulled her close and covered her mouth with trembling fingers. "Be quiet, little flower. Be very quiet," but quiet was not enough. The creature knew they were there. It found the basement door and tore it from its hinges with a sound like breaking bones. Orange light poured down the stairs, growing brighter with each massive footstep. Lucy squeezed her stuffed dog patch against her chest and watched the monster descend into their small hiding place. Grimfang had to crouch to fit in the basement, its crystalline scales scraping against the concrete walls. Up close, the creature was even more impossible than the emergency broadcast had suggested. Its body seemed to shift and flow like living crystal, reflecting the orange light of its eyes in fractal patterns that made Lucy's head hurt. When it opened its mouth, she saw rows of teeth like black diamonds. The beast lowered its massive head until it was only a few feet from the cowering humans. Lucy felt something pressing against her mind, a presence vast and hungry and utterly alien. But where others had experienced crushing despair and overwhelming submission, Lucy felt something else entirely. She felt curiosity. The creature paused, its burning eyes fixed on the small girl. For the first time in its long existence, Grimfang encountered a mind that did not break under its psychic assault. The child's thoughts were clear and bright, untouched by the fear that made other beings so easy to dominate. Instead of terror, she radiated a strange mixture of wonder and sadness that the creature had never experienced before. Lucy stared back at the monster and saw something in those orange eyes that reminded her of the stray cats behind the spaceport. They looked dangerous and wild, but underneath the aggression was something else. They looked lost. They looked alone. "You're really big," she said quietly, her voice steady despite her grandmother's desperate attempts to keep her silent. "Are you lost too?" The question hit Grimfang like a physical blow. In all its eons of existence, across 17 conquered civilizations and countless broken minds, no one had ever asked if it was lost. The creature's psychic presence wavered, confusion replacing the usual overwhelming dominance. Lost? The concept was alien to a being that had claimed entire star systems as hunting grounds. But as the creature examined its own memories, it realized the child might be right. It had been searching for something across the galaxy, something it could never quite identify. Every conquest left it emptier than before. Every world it claimed only increased its sense of isolation. It was the most powerful predator in known space, and it was completely Utterly alone, Lucy's grandmother tried to pull her granddaughter away from the monster, but her frail strength was no match for a determined 8-year-old. Lucy approached Grimfang with the fearless curiosity that only children possess, the same way she had approached the injured bird she found last spring or the scared puppy at the animal shelter. "It's okay," she whispered, though she was not sure if she was talking to her grandmother or to the creature. "Everyone gets lost sometimes. I got lost once in the market, but a nice lady helped me find Nai again. Maybe we can help you find what you're looking for." The beast's massive head tilted to one side, studying this impossible child who offered help instead of fear. Through their psychic connection, Grimfang saw flashes of Lucy's memories. The girl had indeed lost everything that mattered to her, yet she still possessed a capacity for compassion that the creature had never encountered. Her parents were gone, her world was under attack. Her future was uncertain, but she was worried about a monster that could crush her with a single gesture. For the first time in millions of years, Grimfang felt something other than hunger. The emotion was strange and uncomfortable, like a forgotten song half remembered from a dream. It took several moments for the creature to recognize the feeling as loneliness, not the driving need that had sent it across the galaxy, but simple acknowledgement of what it had become. Lucy's grandmother watched in amazement as the terrifying monster that had conquered 17 civilizations simply sat there, staring at her granddaughter with something that might have been confusion. The psychic pressure that should have crushed their minds was still present, but it felt different now. Instead of malevolent force, it carried undertones of uncertainty and something that almost resembled hope. The creature and the child regarded each other in silence, two lost souls recognizing something familiar in the other. Outside, the world burned and humanity prepared for extinction. But in a small basement beneath a ruined house, the galaxy's most feared predator was discovering that it had been searching for the wrong thing all along. It had been looking for something to conquer. Instead, it had found someone who saw it not as a monster, but as another living being in need of help. The realization shook Grimfang to its crystalline core and prepared the way for what would happen next. Lucy Wang, 8 years old and braver than entire armies, was about to change the fate of the galaxy with 3 simple words. Lucy studied the massive creature crouched in their basement with the same careful attention she gave to injured animals. Grimfang's orange eyes burned with ancient power, but she could see something else flickering beneath the flames. The monster looked tired, she realized. Not physically exhausted, but tired in the way her grandmother looked when she thought no one was watching. Tired in the soul. The beast's psychic presence wrapped around Lucy's mind like invisible fingers, but instead of the crushing domination that had broken entire civilizations, she felt only curiosity. The creature was trying to understand her, she realized, the same way she was trying to understand it. The connection flowed both ways, and through it, she glimpsed fragments of Grimfang's memories. She saw flashes of worlds burning under alien suns, heard the screams of populations falling to their knees in worship and terror. But beneath the conquests and devastation, Lucy sensed something that made her heart ache. The creature was searching for something it could not name, calling out into the void for an answer that never came. "You're not really mean, are you?" Lucy whispered, taking another small step closer to the monster that had terrified the galaxy. "You're just scared and angry because you can't find your family." The observation struck Grimfang with unexpected force. Through the psychic link, the creature saw itself through the child's eyes, not as a cosmic terror, but as a lost being driven by instincts it barely understood. Family. The concept was foreign yet somehow familiar, like a word in a language it had once known but forgotten over the eons. Lucy's grandmother watched in horrified fascination as her granddaughter continued to approach the galaxy's most feared predator. Chenwei had seen the emergency broadcasts, had witnessed the footage of entire populations bowing before this creature in mindless worship. Yet here was little Lucy, treating it like a stray animal that needed comfort rather than conquest. "Little flower, come away from there," the old woman whispered desperately, but Lucy was already reaching out her small hand toward Grimfang's massive snout. The creature could have incinerated her with a glance, could have crushed her with a single thought. But instead it remained perfectly still as tiny fingers touched crystalline scales. The contact sent shockwaves through the psychic connection between them. Lucy felt the creature's loneliness like a physical pain, deeper and more profound than anything she had experienced even when her parents died. But Grimfang felt something equally powerful in return, something that had been absent from its existence for so long, that it had forgotten such things could exist, acceptance not. The groveling submission of conquered populations or the terrified worship of broken minds, but simple acceptance of what it was. The child did not flee from its monstrous appearance or cower before its terrible power. She saw the predator and the loneliness and the desperate searching, and she was not afraid. "My parents went away too," Lucy said softly, her hand still resting on the creature's snout. "They went to work in the ice mines on Titan, and there was an accident and they never came back. Nine says they're watching over me from heaven, but sometimes I think they might just be lost out there somewhere, trying to find their way home." Through their connection, Grimfang experienced human grief for the first time. The emotion was different from its own ancient anguish, more focused and somehow more hopeful. The child had lost everything, yet she still believed in the possibility of finding lost things, still retained the capacity to care for others despite her own pain. The creature's psychic presence shifted, confusion replacing the usual overwhelming dominance. For millions of years it had existed as the apex predator, the ultimate expression of power and will, but this small human made it feel something it had never experienced before. She made it feel understood. Lucy's grandmother finally found the courage to move, crawling across the basement floor to put herself between her granddaughter and the monster. But when Grimfang's burning gaze fell upon the old woman, she saw something that stopped her cold. The creature's eyes were no longer filled with hunger or rage. They were filled with something that looked almost like gratitude. "Please don't hurt her," Chenwei whispered, her voice barely audible. "She's all I have left. Take me instead. I'm old and sick, but she has her whole life ahead of her, please." The offer to sacrifice herself for the child sent another wave of unfamiliar emotion through Grimfang's consciousness. The creature had encountered countless acts of courage in its conquests, warriors who fought to the death and leaders who faced annihilation with dignity. But this frail old woman's quiet heroism was different. She was not trying to defeat the monster or even delay it. She was simply trying to protect someone she loved. Love. Another concept that Grimfang recognized but could not quite grasp. The creature's memories stretched back through eons of existence, but they were filled with conquest and dominance, hunting and feeding. When had it last felt anything resembling love? Had it ever? The question troubled the ancient predator in ways it could not understand. Lucy turned to look at her grandmother with the particular mix of exasperation and affection that only children can manage. "Nai, he's not going to hurt us. He's just lonely and confused." "Aren't you?" she asked, turning back to Grimfang with perfect confidence in her assessment. The creature's massive head nodded slowly, an almost human gesture that looked strange on its alien features. Through their psychic connection, it had experienced the bond between grandmother and granddaughter, the way they cared for each other despite their own fears and losses. The love they shared was something Grimfang had sensed from conquered populations before, but always at a distance, always as an outsider looking in. Now, for the first time in its existence, the creature felt included in that circle of care. The child was not afraid of it. The grandmother, despite her terror, was treating it as a being capable of reason, rather than a mindless monster. They were showing it something it had forgotten existed: compassion. Lucy noticed that Grimfang was trembling, tiny vibrations running through its crystalline scales. The sight reminded her of Patch, her stuffed dog, when she held him during thunderstorms. The similarity was so striking that she acted on pure instinct, the way her father had taught her to act around frightened animals back when he was still alive to teach her things. She stepped back from the creature and spoke, with the natural authority that only children possess, the absolute certainty of someone who knows exactly what needs to happen next. Her voice was gentle but firm, carrying all the love and patience she had learned from her parents and grandmother. "Sit." The word was not a command, but an invitation, not a demand for submission, but an offer of peace. Lucy spoke it the way she might to a scared dog or a crying baby, with the expectation that the creature would understand what she was trying to give it: safety, acceptance, a chance to stop running and searching and conquering long enough to remember what it felt like to simply be cared for. Grimfang, the terror of worlds, the hunger between stars, the creature that had brought 17 civilizations to their knees without effort. looked down at the small human child and felt something break inside its ancient heart. Not break in the sense of damage, but break in the sense of ice melting after a long winter. For the first time in millions of years, the galaxy's most feared predator wanted nothing more than to do exactly what it was told. The massive creature settled back on its haunches with careful precision, its burning eyes never leaving Lucy's face. The simple act of obedience felt strange and wonderful, like remembering how to breathe after holding one's breath for eons. In that moment, everything changed. The predator had found its pack, and the pack had found its guardian. The galaxy would never be the same. The world held its breath as news of the impossible spread across emergency networks. Satellite feeds showed the massive creature sitting peacefully in the ruins of a suburban neighborhood, while a small girl spoke to it like a pet. Military commanders stared at their screens in disbelief. Scientists scrambled to understand what they were witnessing. World leaders gathered in their bunkers, afraid to hope that humanity might have found salvation in the most unlikely place possible. Lucy sat cross-legged on the basement floor, looking up at Grimfang with the same expression she used to give her father when he told her stories about the old days on Earth. The creature had folded its massive form to fit in the small space, its burning eyes fixed on her face with an attention so intense it made the air shimmer. Through their psychic connection, Lucy was beginning to understand the truth about the galaxy's most feared predator. The images flowing between their minds told a story of loss and confusion that stretched back millions of years. She saw glimpses of another time, another world, when creatures like Grimfang had served as guardians rather than conquerors. "You used to protect people, didn't you?" Lucy asked softly. "Before you got lost." The question unlocked memories that Grimfang had buried beneath eons of rage and hunting. It remembered a world of crystal spires and floating gardens, populated by beings of pure light who had created the first of its kind to serve as their guardians. The light beings had called them the Keepers, and they had been bred not for conquest but for protection. But the light beings were gone now, had been gone for so long that their sun had burned out and their world had crumbled to dust. Grimfang was the last of its kind, wandering through space without purpose, its protective instincts twisted into territorial aggression by millennia of loneliness and confusion. "My family made you to keep people safe," Lucy said, somehow knowing the truth through their connection. "But when they went away, you forgot how to do it right. You thought taking over planets was the same as protecting them." The creature's massive head drooped with something that might have been shame. Through the psychic link, Lucy felt the weight of all those conquered worlds, all those broken minds, all those civilizations forced to serve a master who had never understood what it truly wanted from them. Lucy's grandmother watched in amazement as her granddaughter seemed to carry on a conversation with the monster, responding to thoughts and emotions that only she could perceive. Chen Wei had lived through 93 years of human history, had seen the first colony ships leave Earth and watched humanity spread across the solar system. But nothing in her long life had prepared her to see a child teaching compassion to a creature that had terrorized the galaxy. "It's okay," Lucy told Grimfang, reaching out to touch the creature's snout again. "Everyone makes mistakes when they're scared and alone. The important thing is to try to fix them. That's what Papa used to tell me when I broke something or hurt someone's feelings." The mention of fixing mistakes sent another wave of unfamiliar emotion through the ancient predator. Was it possible to undo the damage it had caused? Could the populations it had enslaved be freed from their psychic bonds? The concept of redemption was as foreign to Grimfang as love or compassion. But through Lucy's memories, it began to understand that beings could change, could become better than they had been. Over the following hours, Lucy slowly introduced Grimfang to concepts that should have been natural to any social creature, but had been lost in the creature's long exile from its original purpose. She showed it photos on her grandmother's old tablet, pictures of Earth's animals and how they cared for their young, protected their territories, lived together in groups. "See? Even the big animals like elephants and whales live in families," Lucy explained. Scrolling through images with the patience of a born teacher, they take care of each other and share food and play together. The strong ones protect the weak ones, but they don't make them do things they don't want to do. Through their psychic connection, Grimfang began to understand the difference between protection and domination. A guardian watched over those in their care, defended them from threats, provided for their needs. A conqueror took what they wanted and demanded submission in return. The creature had been trying to create a family through force, not understanding that true bonds could only be formed through trust and mutual respect. The realization was devastating and liberating at the same time. Every world it had conquered, every mind it had broken, every civilization it had enslaved had been a desperate attempt to recreate something it had lost, but no longer remembered how to build. It had been trying to fill the emptiness inside itself by taking from others, not understanding that emptiness could only be filled by giving. "I can help you remember how to be good," Lucy offered, her voice carrying the absolute confidence that only children possess. "But you have to want to change. You have to want to help people instead of scaring them." The offer hung in the air between them, a bridge across millions of years of loneliness and pain. Grimfang could feel the sincerity behind Lucy's words, the genuine desire to help despite everything the creature had done. The child was offering it something no one else in the galaxy could give: a second chance. But accepting that chance meant acknowledging the full weight of its crimes. Through their connection, Grimfang felt Lucy's own experiences with guilt and forgiveness. The girl had blamed herself for her parents' death, convinced that if she had been a better daughter, they somehow would have stayed safe. Her grandmother had spent months teaching her that accidents were not anyone's fault, that love did not prevent tragedy, that the best way to honor lost loved ones was to keep caring about the people who remained. The lesson applied to Grimfang as well. It could not bring back the civilizations it had destroyed or undo the pain it had caused. But it could choose to be different from now on. It could choose to use its power to protect rather than conquer, to serve rather than dominate. The choice was not easy. For millions of years, the creature had been driven by hunger and rage and desperate searching. Those emotions were familiar, comfortable in their own terrible way. Love and compassion and the desire to protect others were alien, concepts that required the creature to become something entirely new. But as Grimfang looked down at the small girl who had shown it more kindness than it had experienced in eons, the ancient predator made its decision. Through their psychic link, it reached out to every mind it had enslaved across 17 star systems, and began the long process of setting them free. The effort was enormous, requiring the creature to reverse eons of psychic conditioning with delicate precision. But Lucy's presence gave it strength, her absolute faith that it could be better, providing the motivation to continue even when the task seemed impossible. One by one, across the galaxy, populations began to wake from their enforced servitude. They looked around in confusion at the alien structures they had built, remembered the terrible dreams that had consumed their lives, and slowly began to reclaim their freedom. The news reached Earth within hours. Grimfang's fleet of enslaved vessels had simply stopped responding to the creature's will. Their crews were radioing for help, begging to be rescued from ships they no longer understood how to operate. The conquered worlds were reporting mass awakenings, entire populations suddenly free from psychic control. Lucy smiled as she felt the weight of guilt lifting from Grimfang's consciousness. "See, I told you that you could be good. Now comes the hard part. Now you have to learn how to make friends." 5 years had passed since the day that changed the galaxy forever. Lucy Wang, now 13 years old and already taller than her grandmother, stood in the observation deck of the orbital station that had been built specifically to accommodate Earth's most unusual resident. Below them, Grimfang moved through the vast chamber that served as both home and diplomatic meeting hall, his crystalline scales catching the artificial sunlight in brilliant prismatic displays. The creature had grown smaller over the years, or perhaps it had simply learned to compress its form for the comfort of others. What had once been 30 feet of terrifying predator was now a more manageable 20 feet of patient guardian. The orange fire in its eyes had softened to a warm amber glow, and its movements carried the careful grace of someone who had learned to be gentle with fragile things. President Chen, who had taken office 2 years earlier on a platform of interspecies cooperation, watched through the observation windows as delegates from the Centauri Republic approached Grimfang with offerings of crystallized music, a form of art unique to their silicon-based culture. The creature accepted the gifts with the same careful attention it gave to all such presentations, its psychic presence radiating calm appreciation, rather than the overwhelming dominance that had once terrified the galaxy. "Hard to believe. That's the same monster that conquered 17 star systems," the president murmured, though her words carried no fear. Everyone had gotten used to Grimfang by now, had learned to see past the alien appearance to the gentle intelligence beneath. Lucy smiled, not taking her eyes off her enormous friend. He was never really a monster, just lonely and confused. Sometimes people do terrible things when they hurt too much to think clearly. The observation was spoken with the wisdom of someone who had spent 5 years learning to communicate with an ancient alien intelligence. Lucy had become humanity's first xenopsychologist, though she refused to use such fancy titles. She simply called herself Grimfang's friend and translator, the bridge between human understanding and cosmic loneliness. The transformation had not been easy or immediate. Those first months had been filled with painful revelations as Grimfang slowly remembered what it had been designed to be. The creature's original creators, the light beings of the crystal worlds, had built their keepers to serve as living shields between their civilization and the dangers of deep space. They were meant to be protectors, not conquerors, guardians who would sacrifice themselves to keep others safe. But when the light beings evolved beyond physical form and departed for dimensions beyond human comprehension, they had left their keepers behind without purpose or guidance. Grimfang had wandered the void for millions of years, its protective instincts slowly corrupting into territorial aggression as loneliness and confusion took their toll. Now, with Lucy's help, the creature was remembering its original nature. The process had involved extensive communication with the worlds it had previously conquered, not just to free their populations from psychic control, but to make genuine amends for the trauma it had caused. Some civilizations had been forgiving, understanding that the creature had been acting out of pain rather than malice. Others had needed time and proof of change before they could accept Grimfang's transformation. The proof came in the form of protection. When the mechanical armies of the Void Syndicate had threatened the Outer Rim territories, Grimfang had responded to calls for help with a speed and ferocity that reminded everyone why it had once been so feared. But this time the creature's power had been directed against genuine threats rather than innocent populations. It had driven off the Syndicate's forces without enslaving a single mind, content to simply defend rather than conquer. Word of the galaxy's new guardian had spread quickly through diplomatic channels. Civilizations that had once cowered in terror now sent delegations to Earth, hoping to establish peaceful relations with both humanity and their powerful protector. The result had been an unprecedented era of cooperation and cultural exchange. Lucy had grown up at the center of it all, learning languages and customs from dozens of different species while helping them understand Grimfang's unique perspective. She had mediated disputes between silicon-based traders and water-world merchants, helped establish communication protocols with hive-mind civilizations, and even convinced a particularly stubborn crystal entity to stop blocking trade routes through its territory. The work was exhausting but fulfilling, especially when she saw how much it meant to Grimfang. The creature had found its purpose again, not as a conqueror but as a guardian. Every successful negotiation, every peaceful resolution, every act of protection reinforced the ancient patterns that had been built into its very essence millions of years ago. The Andromedan delegation is arriving tomorrow, President Chen noted, checking her schedule on the tablet she always carried. They're still nervous about meeting Grimfang in person, but they've agreed to the security talks. Lucy nodded, already planning the introduction. The Andromedans were a proud warrior culture that had been among Grimfang's most stubborn opponents during its period of conquest. Convincing them to accept protection from their former enemy would require careful diplomacy, and probably several demonstrations of the creature's changed nature. He's excited about it, Lucy said, feeling Grimfang's emotions through their permanent psychic connection. He remembers their homeworld from before when he was still confused and angry. He wants to apologize properly and show them that he understands what honor means now. The psychic bond between them had evolved over the years from simple communication to something approaching true friendship. Lucy could feel Grimfang's moods and thoughts as clearly as her own, while the creature experienced human emotions and perspectives through her consciousness. They had learned from each other, grown together, become something entirely new in the galaxy's history. Through the observation windows, they watched as the Centauri delegates concluded their ceremony and bowed respectfully to Grimfang before departing. The creature turned its massive head toward the observation deck and nodded to Lucy, a gesture they had developed as their private signal that all was well. Lucy's grandmother, now 98 and confined to a mobility chair but still sharp as ever, reached over to pat her granddaughter's hand. "Your parents would be proud of you, little flower. You've done something wonderful here." The comment brought tears to Lucy's eyes, as it always did. She still missed her parents every day, still wondered what they would think of the strange path her life had taken, but she had learned to carry their memory forward through her actions, to honor them by caring for others the way they had cared for her. "I think they know," Lucy replied softly. "Sometimes when I'm talking to Grimfang about protecting people, I can almost hear Papa explaining how the mining teams looked out for each other in dangerous situations. And when I help him understand how families work, I remember all the stories Mama used to tell about her grandmother." Grimfang's presence touched her mind gently, sharing its own certainty that her parents would indeed be proud. Through their connection, the creature had experienced Lucy's memories of her family, had learned about human love and sacrifice through her stories of two people who had died trying to provide for their daughter. The ancient guardian had adopted those values as its own, had made the protection of families its highest priority. Every world under its care was treated not as a conquest, but as an extension of its own pack, deserving of the same fierce loyalty that Lucy's parents had shown to their child. Evening came to the orbital station, and Lucy made her way down to Grimfang's chamber for their daily conversation. The ritual had started years ago as a way to help the creature process its guilt and confusion, but it had evolved into something much deeper. They shared their experiences, their hopes, their concerns about the future of interstellar relations. "The Andromedans are going to test you tomorrow," Lucy warned, as she settled into her usual spot beside Grimfang's massive form. "They'll want to make sure you're really changed, not just pretending to be peaceful." The creature's mental voice was warm with affection and slight amusement. "Let them test me, small friend. I have learned patience from you and your grandmother. They will see that I am no longer the beast that once threatened their worlds." Lucy leaned against Grimfang's side, feeling the warmth radiating from his crystalline scales. "You were never really a beast, just lost and scared and alone. But now you have a family, and families protect each other." Through their bond, she felt the creature's deep contentment, its satisfaction at having found not just purpose, but belonging. The galaxy's most feared predator had become its most devoted guardian, and the transformation had been accomplished not through violence or domination, but through the simple act of one small girl teaching a lonely creature how to be loved. The stars wheeled overhead, carrying ships full of beings who now looked to Earth not with fear but with hope. And in a chamber filled with artificial sunlight, a human child and an ancient alien guardian planned for a future where protection mattered more than power, where understanding conquered fear, and where even the most lost souls could find their way home. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most fearsome predators just need someone to show them how to be good boys after all.